And I'll read this week's topic from Rays of the One Light. These, as you know, are weekly commentaries on the similarity between the teachings in the Bible and in the Bhagavad Gita. This week is Why Devotees Fall. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles. Yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for him the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. We find Judas reprimanded Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing, with his death, the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This is a wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and kept the purse and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, let her alone, against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but ye have not me always. Doubt not the power of delusion, respect it, indeed fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the second chapter, Sri Krishna states, if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up an attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, or the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows the degeneration of his discriminatory faculty, and when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramahansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. So I'll talk a little bit on the subject, and then Devi will also talk a little bit, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So this is a very interesting topic this evening about what is it that draws us into delusion, and why do we allow our energies to go in a way that we know, for many of us, we know are self-destructive. Here, obviously, Judas was a very high soul. In fact, there's an interesting story that Master told that he didn't put it in books, but he told his disciples. He said that Judas was reborn in this era, and that he lived as a disciple in the ashram of Ramakrishna. And at one point, one of the disciples was teasing him a little bit. He still had a little attachment to money. One of the disciples was teasing him, and Ramakrishna said, "Don't tease him, let him alone. He's suffered enough for this." But interestingly, Master went on to say that Judas then was freed in this lifetime. So whatever that one might think, it must be such a terrible, terrible sin to do something like betray an avatar that results in the death of that avatar. He must have to suffer for thousands of lifetimes for that. But God isn't vindictive. It isn't that he wants us to suffer. He simply wants us to learn from our mistakes. And Judas immediately realized the mistake and went, and in this case he committed suicide, which of course, as we know, is also a spiritual sin. But it also goes in this case to the deep remorse that Judas felt and recognized immediately the error of his ways. But I don't want to dwell on that so much, as I want to come back to the question and the theme. What is it that draws us into delusion, often against our own higher sense, our own conscience? And you know, one of the fundamental teachings of the Vedas, one of the fundamental teachings of yoga, one of the fundamental teachings of Master and Swamiji and our path, is that the whole world is made up of delusion. And delusion is separation, and it always has two poles. Duality always has two poles. What I meant was the whole world is made up from duality, Dvaita. And so Dvaita always has two poles, has a positive pole and a negative pole. And energy moves back and forth between those two poles. So it isn't only plus and only minus. There's a long spectrum of potential activities, potential states of consciousness that are there in that polarity, from the deepest depths of negativity to the highest acts of altruistic behavior, such as an avatar, in this case, such as Jesus was portraying. So you and I, as souls, are caught somewhere along that spectrum. Now, the fact that we're following a path, the fact that we're drawn to a true avatar, and the fact that we have been given and practice what Master's Sanskrit tutor, Kebalanandaji, described as the highest path for freedom, for self-realization through self-effort ever given to mankind. So we have an avatar, we have a deep desire in our own selves for freedom, we have the teacher, we have the technique, we are attracted to be in a group of people seeking. So that all shows that we're very, very close to the end of the spectrum of duality. We're very close to the positive end. In fact, Swamiji said that if you could see the whole long, long cycle of reincarnation, that as a second hand on a clock that goes all the way around for 24 hours, second by second, we're in the last tick or the last few ticks of that second hand by the time we're drawn to a path like this. But nonetheless, we have to take a cautionary tale here, because Judas too was not only very close to liberation, he was there with an avatar, a close disciple, one of the 12 apostles, and still delusion came in and drew his mind. So in the Gita, it talks about how that process works. So we might think of now this spectrum being the duality, the strong, strong sense of egoic separation on one end, and the strong desire, finally the fulfillment of nirvikalpa samadhi on the other end. So think of the most ego-caught person on the planet and someone in nirvikalpa samadhi. That's the polarity. And we're caught somewhere along that spectrum. But what is it that tends to draw us toward the negative, the downward pulling end of that spectrum? Always it's something, some thought, some desire, some reaction comes into our consciousness that affirms the sense of separation. In this case, Judas was arguing with Jesus just a week before Jesus knew that he was going to be crucified, that he was going to be ending that incarnation. But Judas didn't know that. And Judas was arguing with his master. Now, to argue with your master when you know what a great soul he is, that represents some delusive activity of the ego saying, I know better than Jesus. I know better than Yogananda. I know better than Babaji. They're just out of tune. They don't understand worldly power. They don't understand the influence of money. I have to educate them. And so see how that egoic, that sense of wanting to separate, in this case, wanting to separate by saying that you as an individual ego are wiser than someone who is in nirvikalpa samadhi. And always the mind follows the heart. So if the heart wants that separation, then it will find a reason. If it hadn't been money, it would have been Jesus grows his hair too long. Or he wears the wrong clothing. It would be something to say, I'm smarter, I'm wiser, I'm better than someone else. And it is, of course, just toward the great ones. Everybody sees, well, you're crazy if you think that you're wiser than Jesus. But what about thinking that you're wiser than the people that you work with? Or the people that are sweeping the streets? Or the people that you see every day as you drive along the street and they're beggars? What about this thought in the egoic consciousness that says, I'm better than them? I'm better, I'm smarter, I'm wiser. Everyone is made of God. Everything is made of God. And every person is divine mother in a manifested form. But we don't see that we don't see the God in manifested form behind, and therefore we separate. The ego downward pulling tendency forces us to separate. So what we need to do is to continue all of the practices, both sadhana and satsang and service, all of those things that help open the heart, expand the heart, and see unity where others see diversity. The opposite of egoic separation is self-realized unity. So everything that we do in that end will lead us in that way. But as Master ends, or Swami ends the little reading here with Master talking, or Babaji in the form of Krishna, talking about how the soul is drawn into delusion. First we ponder an object, that brings attraction. Attraction brings desire. Desire, because it's thwarted, brings anger. Anger brings, in this case he says, anger brings infatuation. Infatuation narrows down the focus of our desire to one thing over all other things, and that brings the loss of discrimination. So what he says is to catch that process as early as possible. One of Master's great women disciples said that we're not responsible for the first thought that comes into our mind. That kind of comes unbidden. But we're responsible for the train of thoughts that follows after that. So if we see a desire or a negation of other people, if we see anything that affirms the ego, then as soon as we catch that, try to say, I'm not this body and personality, not in my essence. In my essence, I am only God, and only God exists.
I'll share a few thoughts as well. You know, first I'll share on a more individual level how we ourselves deal with negative currents, and then also on a larger global scale. Swami taught us that when you're dealing with some aspect of yourself that you would like to change, he said it's difficult to just say, I will never do this again. Let's say maybe we'll use a very innocent example. Maybe we really love ice cream, and every day after work we go and we buy a lot of ice cream and we eat it, and we know it's not good for us, but that's what we do. We have this bad habit. And so there's several strategies that we can look at to avoid doing things that we know will bring us suffering. The first, and we touched on this when we read the section on introspection from the affirmations for self-healing, we have to be honest with ourselves. If we have something we want to change, we can't rationalize it and say, oh, it's okay, it's really not my problem. If it's a problem, it is. And we need to just say, yes, I am eating too much ice cream now. But at the same time, not to feel guilty about it, not to say, oh, I'm a terrible person because I eat too much ladus or whatever it may be. You just say, it happens. And so Swami said, quoting Master, if we have a bad habit, he said, I'm not asking you to overcome. I'm asking you to resist. And that's a very important point. If we can just say, I don't want to have this habit, but I don't, at this point in my life, I don't have the ability to just cut it off, but I will resist. I will resist, and I will not identify with this as a bad habit. Swami gave the example of when he was a young man before he came to Master. It's hard to imagine, but he had the habit of smoking cigarettes. And he would carry a cigarette pack in his pocket. And he didn't like the habit, but he was addicted to it, as happens with nicotine. But he kept repeatedly saying, I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to stop smoking. And his friends began, oh yes, we've heard that before, kind of teasing him about it. But Swami said, I never gave up. I drew on the thought, I haven't yet succeeded. And little by little, that moment came when he knew he was free. And he took that packet of cigarettes out of his pocket, and he gave all the cigarettes away to his friends, and he was done. And so for each of us, if we can remember, just resist. Resist the pull. Don't just say, okay, it's who I am, I smoke cigarettes, or I eat too much sweets. But say, I am resisting that. And what happens when we resist? Little by little, that momentum builds. And it's an energy. That's what all our thoughts are, patterns of energy. And so if we keep putting out that thought, I am resisting this. I haven't succeeded today, but I will keep trying. Then little by little, that thought, it's like, it's like walking, if you're walking through a beautiful meadow filled with flowers, and little by little you start becoming, the little petals start clinging to your clothes, and you realize that, and then when you leave, you realize, oh, look at all the flowers, they've come with me. And so if you can just keep building that thought, I am resisting this. And if maybe it's a problem we have with family where they're always negative, and then we get angry in return. And when that happens, don't say, oh, I'm a terrible devotee. Just say, okay, today I didn't succeed. Tomorrow I will try again. And if we just keep trying, little by little, that power grows stronger until the day comes where you just say, I'm free of this. I've had this experience in my own life with an emotional pattern that I just didn't like, but I couldn't. And years ago, I asked Swami, I said, Swami, what more can I do? I have this negative habit in my mind and I can't get rid of it. And he said, he was so compassionate and wise, and he just said, ultimately these things are just God's grace. But then the day came when I realized it wasn't there anymore. I didn't have that negative pattern. But the interesting thing was, and I shared this with you because you may have this too, the form of those negative thoughts would still come, but there wasn't any energy inside of them. So it was like a hollow ghost that just said, oh, here I am again. And I just looked and said, you don't have any power over me anymore. And it was such a wonderful thing. I felt so free. So with these things that pull us down and hold us back, just do your best to resist that pull. And then, as Swami said, ultimately it's God's grace. And then combining those two, cooperating with that grace by our own efforts, one day, doing, one day done. And then you just say, I've really overcome that. And maybe no one else in the world knows. And maybe I don't look any different. Maybe I don't act any different. But in my heart, I know I'm different. And it's a great blessing. So that's on a personal level. But then also, I want to talk about things on a global level now. Because certainly being in America now, it's a terrible time. There's so much negativity, there's so much hatred, there's so much violence, and I don't want to scare people, but you read the news, you know what's going on. And it's very easy to get pulled, even as devotees, to become self-righteous and say, these people are bad, I hate these people. But we can't do that, because then we're being pulled into the same current where they are. And I realized this again. I was thinking about the President of America and having all these negative thoughts towards him. And then I thought, no, that's what he lives on. That's his food. That's what he feeds on. If I want to stop him, I've got to send him love. That's the worst thing in the world for him. And so I just began trying to feel compassion and sending him love. But really, there are very strong currents at play in the world now. Forces of light and dark, more strong than I've ever experienced them in my whole lifetime. And we have to be very mindful, just as it said in this passage from the Gita. You know, it's that little dwelling, in Krishna says here, on objects of desire, but that little dwelling on any kind of negativity, on hatred, on judging, on blaming, on wanting to stop. As soon as those thoughts come, that's a current. Master talked about a dark force, a satanic force that draws people into it. And we can get caught as devotees because we can say, oh, those people are bad. They're not living a spiritual life. But then we get sucked into the same current that they're in. So we have to be very careful now and do our utmost to just stay in the light. Keep our hearts free, keep our hearts filled with love for all people, because from hatred, even of what's wrong, even when we see evil in the world, we can oppose it, we can resist it, but we don't have to hate it. If you hate it, then you're keeping part of it in your own heart. And so, I mean, that's how the great saint Mahatma Gandhi, it's how he freed India. Never to allow that animosity to grow in his own heart, no matter what happened. And that's the most powerful force in the universe. And that, as devotees now, that's what, East and West, that's what we're being asked to do now. There's so much hatred and darkness, but if we can't find a place to stand in love, unconditional love and light, who can? We can't expect the politicians to do it. That's not their food. Their food is opposition, adversarial consciousness. But our food is joy and love. And if we can't do it, then I think that's why Master has come now. It's why he's come from India to America to train us. It's why we're all together creating a global astral nation of devotees, and so that we can be a force of that love in the world today. And Master didn't come just to pat us on the head and say, okay, go meditate in your little room and find God. He was a warrior. He came always at the forefront of world change, and we are his army. His army of love, his army of light, of forgiveness, of compassion. And we have to be mindful of this now. No matter what you're doing in your life, if you're focusing on your studies or your work or your family or whatever it might be, do what your dharma, your personal dharma, but don't forget, we've come as Master's army, and we can be pulled very easily into this dark current because we're sensitive to other people's suffering, but we have to resist, and we have to. Swami has that wonderful song, shouts not of anger, joy will be our gun. So joy is our gun that Master said, I shoot people, sad people, with the buckshot of your smiles. And so we have to smile, give love, give joy, even more now than ever before. And so we have a part to play and it's why we came into this world at this time. When I meet the devotees of Ananda all over the world, I look at them and I think, honestly, I think these people have been seeking God for many lifetimes. And now we've come to, whether this is our last life or not, it's hard to say, but there won't be a lot more. But we've come to finish off our karma, but to help now in the transition that the world is going through, to bring light into the world. So these teachings are so relevant on so many levels for our own freedom and for the evolution of our planet. And we need to see them both deeply personally, but also in a very broad perspective, from a very broad perspective, and then act on them. This was Master's way. He was not an avatar, he was a Prem avatar, an incarnation of love, but he was also a soul who understood the power of action. And he brought to us Kriya Yoga, the act that frees us, but also helps us to act in the world as divine instruments. So I don't know, we want to invite you all now to ask us questions if you have any. And there's someone wandering around the back of the room I can see. It's Mr. Dharmarajan.
Do you want to add anything, Dharmarajan?
No, I accept our gratitude for having you with us, because this is a very helpful message for today, personally, and of course, globally, very much. Okay. First, Prasanna.
Thank you, Jyotish, for satsang. I wanted to ask your suggestions in how we can start our daily practices by cultivating a joyful interest in our meditation, in our sadhana every day.
Okay, well, I will give a few very practical suggestions. First of all, have a regular time for meditation. I know that many of you come for meditation to the center, and that regular practice sets a groove in the brain. Master said that he compared it to records that had a needle that ran around a groove. Today we would say that creates a circuit in the neurons in the brain, and as we do an action repeatedly, that circuit grows stronger and stronger. And so having a regular time for meditation is very important. That also means that from the time that you get up in the morning, your mind begins to go, how much time do I have left until I have to get to the ashram for meditation? What do I need to bring? So your mind is already moving in that direction. Then the energization gets the energy moving in a positive direction. It all brings the energy inward, and it strengthens the will to attune. You know, the very basis of the energization is that we're attuning to God's flow through us to energize our body and to make it strong and healthy. And so to start with energization already gets the energy moving in a divine sense. It strengthens our connection with the divine, and it gets the energy moving positively. Then the meditation itself is the very best practice we can. And then to continue as long as you can to touch in during the day to little points of remembrance of what your life really is. Most of us have jobs that require concentration on the work itself. So we can't be sitting there, I don't know, thinking of producing a program and thinking, oh, I love Krishna and I want to chant more and maybe I'll think of the altar, and we couldn't do our work. So we have to do our work, but in the little spaces that we have, then to tune in, just take a few deep breaths, do a little bit of Hong Saw. At lunchtime, if you can, have a quiet place, do a few Kriyas, just tune in as often as possible. And then again at night, so the beginning of the day, the end of the day is attuned to God, and that energy is going as strongly that direction as possible. That keeps the energy moving toward the end of the spectrum that results in superconscious self-realization.
And I will just add a few thoughts. It's helpful when you first come out of subconscious sleep. I don't know, maybe you all go to superconscious sleep, but for me, it's a subconscious sleep. But as soon as you make that transition if you can catch it, that little, very subtle transition between subconscious and conscious, as soon as you catch it, start chanting before you even open your eyes or get out of bed or do anything. but just start chanting it, right? And if you're trying to find more joy, you can chant joy, 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 whatever, Om Guru, but just, and it's a very nice thing. And so to get out, to awaken with that consciousness. And then the next suggestion I have seems a little, as they say in the computer world, counterintuitive, but it works. If you're having a period where you're resisting meditation, or it's dry, or it's not fun, I mean, everybody has those, I assume. I certainly know I do. Rather than backing off of your meditation, like, oh, I'm not going to do, maybe I won't meditate today because I'm having a dry period. Try to meditate longer. And again, it's that funny period where you feel like, I don't want to meditate anymore. I'm done. I'm not feeling any energy. I'm not feeling any inspiration. But if you push past that, that's usually where you can have a breakthrough. And you'll find if you do that for like a few days, if you just really push past it, you'll get back aligned again. And then you'll start, it won't be such an effort. But I believe I shared with you all in some of our classes in Chennai one of my favorite quotes of Master, and believe me, I use it a lot in my meditation when I'm going through a dry period. Master said, this is a quote, I read it, and I know I've told you before, but it's so important. Master said, I remember the day when for the first time, unlooked for, from behind the clouds of drudgery, of routine meditating habits, the drudgery of routine meditating habits, that just resonated with me. And there burst upon my consciousness the aurora of bliss. It surpassed all my expectations. Joy indescribable. And I repeat that a lot during meditation. But when I just get to that dry place where I just think, oh Lord, why don't you come? I don't feel your presence. I don't feel your joy. And then I just turn that on and I repeat that. And then I try to feel the aurora of bliss. It surpassed all my expectations. Joy indescribable. And I think that's in my consciousness right now. And sometimes I can begin to feel it. So whatever it takes, just if you're feeling dry, if all you can do is imagine inspiration, imagine what it would feel like if Master appeared to you in this moment in your meditation room. Imagine that joy in your heart. And so, but dry periods and emptiness in meditation, everybody has them, but the trick is to say, I am more, I think Master has a poem, I am more cunning than delusion. I am more powerful than the resistance to meditation. And you just keep pushing through and pushing through. And as the days go by and the weeks go by, and my friends, even as the years go by, little by little you start saying, I have built a foundation of peace and joy in my meditation that doesn't ever go away. So, are there other questions? Prasanna.
For the thoughts and inspiration. When Jyotish said about that work, something gets stuck. So usually I build a little bit of momentum in routine meditation, and then I hit a roadblock at any task, even at work or learning a new chant or listening to one hour talk or something. I don't do that. Like I get stuck in that 20th minute or 30th minute. I couldn't push through. When I little bit develop the routine and get stuck in that, how do we get past that roadblock? Anything, could be anything like work or anything. So, but I get stuck there and then it just drops. The momentum drops completely to zero again. So how do I get past
Yeah,
that?
you know, there's no one answer. Uh, it's, I don't know, like moving through traffic. You can't always say, oh, you just go straight. You just have an accident, especially in India. Maybe in America you could tell a person to drive straight, but in India that would create chaos. So you just have to maneuver when there's a blockage. Sometimes you have to do more devotion and just chant and chant and chant. I found it's more effective, for me at least, if I'm trying to reawaken devotion, to take one chant and do it repeatedly for a long period of time, days maybe. Sometimes it's listening to Master's voice. Sometimes it's just being with other people. But there are many, many tools in our tool belt that we all have. And if you're trying to undo a screw from a door hinge, a hammer is not the best tool for that. You want to get a screwdriver to do that. So just feel what tool you have that will get you past this block that you're in, and then try to use that. And sometimes just relaxation is the way. It's Master and Swamiji used to say that the ego is like a fish, and if the fish is swimming strongly away, sometimes you have to let out a little bit of line, then it'll tire, then you can reel it in. And so sometimes we just have to relax and not push. Sometimes, as Devi said, we have to push through the resistance. But we have to have a lot of different strategies, because the traffic jam that we're in is never going to be the same each day.
That's really true.
Karthik?
Kartik?
Thank you for your presence, Ji.
Oh.
I don't know whether it's a query or I'm putting it right. Some thought which I always have been wanting to ask. In the East, it is, the East of the world, it's always a search for what we don't know. No? So, whereas in the West, it is more of belief and faith is the system what they have, right? So, whether we talk about a Christianity or a Islamic system, they have got what is called a faith. And so they already know something on which they believe and go as a faith. Whereas the East has always been looking for something which we don't know. I'm talking about the presence of God. So as the practice has been a search onto ourselves. Now we have come into a system wherein we try to merge the two. We have a faith and we try to do a search. Where do these two meet is something that has always been intriguing. So I thought I'll probably just ask you this.
Okay, well, it's faith. Really, faith is, Swami used to talk about a difference between belief and faith. So belief doesn't get us very far at all. It just gets us started. You can believe that the earth is flat, but that doesn't make it flat. But nonetheless, it'll get you moving a little bit. Faith is something that you've tested for a long time. So faith would be, for us, something like that Master has a lot of wisdom. And I've looked at his books. I've listened to his disciples. I've listened to his voice. I've compared it to other things. I've seen that what he offers is wisdom, and I have faith, therefore, that what he says in an area that I don't know is also filled with wisdom. So faith is developed belief from personal experience. But even faith will only take us a certain degree. And I think the marriage between the Eastern thoughts and Western faith and belief is that faith and belief and faith will get you started, but it won't get you all the way. There has to be the thirst for the unknown and the desire to merge with God. I liked what Vivekananda said. He said, it's a blessing to be born in a religion, but a curse to die in one. And so I would say it's a blessing to be born with faith, with belief and faith, but a curse to die only having faith in what you already have known. You have to push into the unknown. And so I would say the marriage between East and West is the West gets you started well, and the East finishes the job.
Yeah, I would just add, I first read the Bhagavad Gita when I was probably about 17 years old. I was in high school. And similar to the way Swami reacted to it when he read it, it was like a window opened and this fresh air came blowing in of such a subtle perception of reality. And I think that's the difference, is that the Indian mentality, particularly of all the Eastern countries, has that subtlety and philosophical approach to life that looks for the answers to questions that most people in the West never even know about. Oops, did we lose?
Oh, are you guys there? You're there?
Are you there?
Okay.
Okay, there was a
Okay.
break in the internet. Essentially, the Indian mentality, Master even mentions it in the autobiography where he says, would anything small or circumscribed ever satisfy the consciousness of India? And it wouldn't. And yet in the West, because there's more of a materialistic consciousness by and large, those questions never even come up. And I know when I was growing up as a young person, I had a very nice family and neighborhood and schools that I went to, but I never could figure out why the people weren't concerned about what is this all for. They were just happy to be living their lives, and I was asking, but why are we here? And they never were asking those questions. It seemed evident to them, well, to get more money and buy a house and all these things. So I think, and that's why our line of gurus saw the importance of bringing East and West together. And I think someone just told me a few days ago that with all the political and social turmoil in America, they've taken a poll that the number of yoga practitioners in the last 2 months has gone up. 18 million people more are meditating and doing yoga now.
Wow.
Because of what's going on.
Wow.
And so I thought, well, if this is what it takes, I guess it's worth it. But, India is such an old culture. And they've seen, civilizations come and go. And the West, by and large, everything's new. And they still believe that it can be better. And they can improve it. And so I think it's a matter of time and experience and maturation of a civilization where they start saying, it's never going to get better than this. The only real betterment is of my own consciousness. Well, should we take one more question?
Okay, one more question if there is one. Okay.
Okay, yes, Kartik
No, it's behind.
No, behind Kartik.
is also Kartik.
Oh, okay.
Another Kartik.
Kartik too.
Close to him. Thanks for taking the time today. I just have a question regarding meditation practice. It seems to me that
Can you make it louder?
making a little bit of progress, something happens physically, health-wise, to sort of stop the practice and take me a couple of steps back. I've always been fairly healthy, but when I seem to make some progress, I get back in and I have to stop. I doing something wrong? Should I be doing something different, or is this to be expected?
So are you saying in the meditation itself, a physical problem arises while you're meditating, or as you are making headway, building a routine, then some physical thing comes up? Okay, the second thing. Sorry, hold on. Yeah, so in other words, as you're building up your meditation routine in your spiritual life, then some physical ailment comes to knock you off the pattern you're developing. Correct? Okay, that's the question. And are you doing something wrong, or why should it be, or it's not fair, or can we just find the solution to it? Is somehow the question. Okay.
I feel it's frankly it's really not fair.
It's obviously not fair. That's delusion. Delusion does not fight fair. So we can't expect Satan or Maya to behave itself and fight by the proper rules. It will use any trick that it can. And that's why even in the Gita, Krishna told Yudhishthira to tell a little lie so that Bhishma could be overcome. At any rate, there is, I think that all we can do, what is our choice? If these ailments come, then they come, and we just still have to plow on, still have to do our best. Swami Kriyananda had so many physical challenges. In his case, I think he was taking on karma for other people. But nonetheless, challenge after challenge physically would come to him, and he just continued to do his duty or his service to his master no matter what came, to the best of his ability within whatever was being presented. If you break your leg, you can't go out and run a marathon on a broken leg, but that doesn't mean that you also have to just lay in bed and say, oh, woe is me. Do the best you can given the circumstances that you're dealing with. And so with you, the desire to move ahead spiritually, there's some aspect in your karma that Maya is using to give you physical challenges to try to stop you. So don't let Maya win.
There's a wonderful story Master tells of a very dedicated devotee who would get up every morning at 3 o'clock and meditate for many hours before he had to go to work. And so Satan was looking down and he said, oh, this man is making too much spiritual progress. Let's throw some problems in his way. And so he sent one of his little agents down, and he said, make him sleep late this morning so he won't get up and meditate early. And so it's the little agent of Satan turned off the man's alarm clock so he wouldn't get up on time. And then
and don't invite that agent in.
but then Satan's watching what happens, and he goes, oh, this is a disaster. And his little minion said, what's wrong, Lord of darkness? I made him sleep in. He said, yes, but before he would only think of me during the 4 hours that he meditated. He felt so bad that he slept in. He thought of me all day long. It's much worse. Thought of God all day long. It's much worse now. And so
he said, tomorrow be sure you wake him up on time again.
But all that to say, when you're trying to get a good habit of meditation going and something comes to block that or thwart that, really you can see this is an opportunity, because it's making the longing in my heart to meditate and to seek God even stronger. So if you hurt your back and so you can't sit to meditate, then you just chant and think of God or read books about God, but turn that energy that is preventing you from meditating it, just do it in a different form. And then after a while, I think whatever force is trying to block you will say, this guy's serious, let's leave him alone. And then it'll work out nicely. But it really, the spiritual path, it's one of the most, well, some people have described it as walking on the edge of a razor. You know, you go too far in one direction, you fall off, you go too far in the other, you fall off. But it's really learning, like Jyotish used the example of driving through the traffic. It's learning where the pitfalls are, learning where I know if I don't get up at this time, I'm not going to have enough time to meditate, so I better do that. And, you know, if I eat too big a meal at night, I'll be too tired to meditate. So little by little, you learn how to navigate through all the obstacles that come. If you get sick, if you can't meditate, you think, okay, then I'll just listen to talks, inspiring talks. I'll lay here in bed and listen to inspiring talks. But if you just say, no matter what happens, I have made a commitment in my life to seek God and to give my life to the best of my ability at the feet of my Guru. If you just make that commitment, eventually the obstacles will fall away. So it is fair. I'm sorry to say that to you, but it's not only fair, it's a gift.
Yes.
Be grateful.
Okay, good friends.
Now, is Sundaraj in there? We can't see in the back too well. Because is it his birthday?
It is, but is he here?
No, he's in Coimbatore. His some relative passed away.
Oh,
That's right. Yeah,
Wish him
his-
happy birthday
his
for
wife's
us.
younger brother. Yeah.
And we're so happy to see you all. And we can't wait to come back and just be with you. And thank you all for your beautiful spirit. And thank you for your friendship in God. It means more to us than we can say.
Yes. God bless you all.
We'll be counting down the days.
We also have small gifts for you both
Oh,
from everyone there, sent through the television.
these,
Aw.
see, modern technology even can manifest things.
Thank you.
Oh, look how beautiful.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's really beautiful. From Oroville.
It's beautiful.
I'll put it on. Thank you.
Let me get you something sharp in case it's needed.
It looks very beautiful. He's getting a knife.
Okay, there he is.
I feel like a surgeon now. Okay, here we go.
We need Sharmila.
I don't know how long you all have today. This may take me a while. Oh,
Oh,
oh, it's beautiful. My goodness. Oh, Let's see. Whoever wrapped this, you know they're very conscientious.
Here, maybe I can.
It's almost done.
Ah, she's getting it.
So this is sort of like finding God. You have to tear through all the layers of delusion, and then there's Divine Mother. Oh, she's beautiful, really beautiful.
We'll put that on our altar at home.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, thank you. And oh, you want me to hold it?
Closer to the camera, Ji.
Bring it to the camera.
Thank you.
Okay, dear friends, thank you so much. And
Thank you, Ji.
That
Such a
is-
blessing
Thank you,
to
Ji.
connect with you and personally like this. Thank you.
Let us just take a picture of you with them.
okay. Hold your.
Oh, okay.
Okay, everyone. Guruji.
Guruji.
Beautiful. Thank you all.
Okay.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.